ourselves, but we've had that done for us now, so I won't do that. Okay, so today our talk's really going to be about ourselves, which is, I guess, what we like talking about the most. And I really want to take you through kind of like how we started Nitrome and how we kind of like got to where we are now. And along the way, kind of hopefully there'll be some kind of like lessons in what we did well and what we didn't do maybe so well that'll maybe be useful kind of tips for you all, and you can maybe learn something from that. So I'm going to primarily be doing the talking, as you can see, but John here.
Glorified button clicker.
That's pretty much it. So Nitrome was started by me, not John, but it was started by myself and my partner Heather Sandcliffe, and we started about 5 years ago. And if John brings it up now, we started from a pretty small bedroom in a rented place that we were renting, and it wasn't long after we started that John came on board, so he can take a little bit of credit, not much, but a little bit. But you know, it was quite kind of a small space that we started out.
It was a box. Yeah.
It was pretty much a box. So yeah, it was quite a small space, but it was important that we started like that, because to start off with, we really didn't make very much money, as you can see there. Yeah. So the first section that I want to kind of talk about today is really about building a brand, because that's where we started. So when you're kind of building a brand, you obviously start at the beginning, so that is coming up with a name. So we get quite a lot of questions on kind of like how we came up with our name, emails maybe. And when we kind of started off, we wanted like what most people do. We wanted kind of something that was quite short, wanted something snappy, we wanted something that people are going to remember. But we also knew that we were going to be making flash games, and they were ultimately going to end up on the web, so we wanted to make sure that we could get a web address that wasn't going to be too hard for people to find. So it was important that we could get the .com, and it was important that maybe it wasn't going to do things that were going to confuse people, like misspelling something or making something that was too long so people could make mistakes. So we thought, okay, that's quite difficult to achieve all of those without forking out a lot of money. As I said before, we didn't really have much in the way of money, so we thought, okay, well, we thought back to the kind of games that we were playing as kids, and the sort of games companies that kind of came up a lot were the kind of Japanese companies, so kind of Capcom, Nintendo, Sega.
And stuff like that,
yeah, and what kind of struck us about them was that we didn't have a clue what they meant, and back when we were kids, we didn't care. So we kind of thought about that for a bit, and we thought, well, maybe we should just approach that with our name, and so we just made something up. So Nitrome doesn't mean anything. It has no meaning or anything like that. We just thought it sounded okay, and we just ran with it. So once we had a name, so I've got paper here just to kind of like keep me on track. I'm not really looking at it apart from to go, that's what's next. But yeah, so what is next is the logo.
No, you missed a bit.
I've missed a bit.
You missed a bit.
I have missed a bit.
You missed a bit.
This is John's bit.
I'll fill that gap in. And just saying, there was one thing you forgot to mention, is that when we actually picked the name out of a hat, pretty much, to get the .com address, we forgot one thing, and people didn't actually know how to pronounce the name. So yeah, some of you guys were talking about it earlier. So yeah, I'm just going to show you a fan video to illustrate how passionate some of our fans might be about.
One of the really popular free games website out at the moment called this. I'm not going to say it for reasons you'll understand later. The thing that really annoys me is the way that different people pronounce it in different ways. Now, I personally call it Nitrome.
Which is the way it is said.
People call it Nitrome. I mean, it's Nitrome. That's the way it's spelled. Nitrome, not Nitrome. Who pronounces it Nitrome? Anyway, post what you think. If you think it's like this, Nitrome, or like this, Nitrome.
Get ready for the best bit.
I never get tired of that.
So anyway, that's probably one of my favourite clips that a fan's ever made, and it's really quite stupid and simple, and he got a lot of comments negatively about him maybe making that post. But I mean, even though it's something that we overlooked, ultimately I think that any kind of people talking about you in any way is ultimately a positive thing, as, you know, really it's just spreading the word about you, and however people find out about you, it really doesn't matter. So I will move on to the next section now, which is the logo. And when we came up with the logo, like the like the name, we wanted something that was going to stand out, and we wanted to come up with a way of really kind of making people notice it. So the thing that we were thinking of when we came up with the way that we do our logos, we were thinking of, you know, the startups to the Simpsons episodes where all of the characters run into the couch, and then it's always different every single episode. And it was always something that we always looked out for at the beginning of the episode. And we thought, well, how can we do that with our branding so that people notice at the beginning of our games? And we approached a pretty similar thing. We just decided, okay, we'll just make it different every time, but we'll just keep just a small amount of it the same so that you can recognize the logo through it. And really the idea behind it was that if people play a few games, our intention was that they've noticed the logo and then they notice the brand and then they go, hey, I like that game and I liked a few other games that these guys made, so maybe I'll check them out and see if they've made anything else that I like. And I think it's something that works quite well because we get a lot of emails and people tend to say that this is the way that they generally found us. So the last section that I want to talk about in branding is really the website itself. Now, when we started off, we kind of made the bold decision, which not a lot of people were doing at the time, which was to make the website and only put our own games on there, not kind of try and go after the big portal route and kind of put everyone's games on there. And really to us, it was mainly just because at the beginning we didn't really see ourselves as being a portal. We saw ourselves just as being game developers, and we really just wanted to make games. We didn't really want to get into all the adverts and all that sort of thing. We obviously did, but you know. And so when we were approaching the website, we wanted to kind of like think about how we were going to do that. And because we had this extra control, because we were making all the games ourselves, we could do things like we could just make all of the games the size that we wanted them to be so that everything would fit tidily around it, and not have to really kind of keep it quite sterile so that everything will sit on it. We could just kind of like go crazy with it. And kind of when we kind of hit upon that, we thought, okay, well, how can we make the kind of website kind of as much of an extension of the games? So what we wanted to try and do was kind of like bring that fun from the games and kind of spread it throughout the website itself as well. So the main example I can really kind of give of that is really the kind of skins section, which we kind of periodically kind of bring out new skins for the site, and they tend to have like lots of the characters in the skins. And what we kind of did by accident kind of early on when we made the winter skin is that we put a lot of characters in, and because we were kind of pressured to get the skin up before Christmas because it was the winter skin, we kind of put it up, but some of the games weren't actually out yet that were in the skin. And what we kind of noticed was that a lot of people on different forums were kind of going, hey, what's that game? Hey, what's that game? And they were kind of, again, kind of talking about us, and we thought, this is quite good. We should encourage this. So basically in every skin since then, we've been putting like every character from every game that we've been working on at the time in it. Even if we've been working on it for like 2 days, if we've got a character drawn, it goes in the skin. So, and it's something that it still seems to work, and it's just that kind of, I think it's just that kind of like Pokemon mentality. You've got to like find everything out about them, and we just try and kind of encourage any kind of fun element to our site that we can find. So, I think, unless I'm wrong,
The next section.
it is the next section. Okay, so we go on to the next section, which is games, games, games. And the thing is, it doesn't matter how good your branding is. If your games are shit, it really doesn't count for much. So I kind of wanted to go through the games that we've actually made, and kind of, particularly I want to go through the first few games and kind of basically show how we started and how quite early on we kind of changed direction in what we were doing. So the first game that we made was Hot Air, and we purposely kept it quite simple. It's all single screen stuff, there's no scrolling, and if you hit anything you die, just so we didn't have to bother with any complex collision or anything like that. And also we didn't want to kind of have anything that could even approach kind of giving us any sort of slowdown that would cause us problems. So we did that, and it worked fairly well. We got to kind of like put some pretty cool ideas in it, and as you can see, it did okay. I mean, it looks pretty terrible. I hope you can see there that we've got some room for growth. It's not just a terrible graph. But ultimately it was successful in that it paid us enough money to pay the rent and to pay the bills, and ultimately we could then go on and make another game. So that's what we did. We went on to make our second game, Sandman. It was a little bit more complex. We had scrolling this time, and a little bit of collision, a bit dodgy collision, but collision nonetheless. And that went on to do quite well. We sold licenses to that game, and we'd managed to sell it to everyone who'd bought licenses to Hot Air and some more on top. So If we go back to the graph,
Back?
no, forward to the graph, you can see it did better. So that was good. So we were on a roll, so we went straight onto our third game, which was Chick Flick. And Easter was coming up at this point, so we thought, okay, cute furry animals bouncing chicks into the nest. Sounds like a winner. So we rolled forward, we went out, sent it out to see how many licenses we'd get, and as you can see on the graph, it did terribly. In fact, we really struggled to pay the rent this month. We really didn't have any money much whatsoever. So this was quite a bad point for us. We really were kind of questioning whether we could actually kind of keep doing what we were doing. And one really bad thing that kind of happened at this time was that ultimately we kind of had to say bye to John.
Guys.
So we got rid of John, which, you know, maybe was a good thing. It brought the money down anyway. And things, I mean, they seemed quite bad at that point, but usually when things are going really bad, something else just kind of turns up that maybe you weren't paying too much attention to before. And the thing for us was that we were getting kind of offered a sponsorship deal through Miniclip, which I'm sure you see their logo on a lot of our games. And really the big thing with the sponsorship deal with Miniclip, we'd been saying no before that point, but they started saying, okay, how about we do it, and we'll do it for kind of like 6 games. So this was like, we were making about a game a month at this time, and having 6 months money kind of guaranteed seemed like a pretty good deal to us. So we ultimately went with that, and off the back of that, we were getting a bit less money than what we'd managed to make off the first 2 games kind of licenses, so John still had to go. But ultimately, it was good for me and Heather, not so much for John. So, yeah, you know, you're still there. But so anyway, I'll move on to the next section now, which is something that we value quite a lot at Nitrome, which is originality. And really what I want to talk about is the pros and cons of originality. And I want to do this by kind of like showing a couple of examples and kind of explaining what I mean by the pros and cons. So the first game I've got up here is a game that maybe some of you might recognise, but it's not one of our better known games, but it's called Dangle. And basically you play as a spider, you kind of like swing in with the mouse left and right, and if you click below he'll drop down the thread, if you click above he'll kind of climb back up, and he kind of catches on the side of things, and you just have to get him down to the bottom of the level without getting him too hurt. So it seemed like quite a nice idea, it was quite original, but we got about halfway through the development of it, and the guy who was programming it said, you know what, this controls like shit. We really should like maybe consider like moving it to keys. And like me in my kind of like authoritative role said, no, you don't want to do that. That seems less original. I think we should like stick with the mouse. That seems like more different, and different is good, you know, it'll stand out more. So we stuck with that and we released it, and the feedback we got was, guys, this game controls like shit. Why didn't you just put it on the keys? So we did ultimately kind of like reflect on this a bit, and we went back and we looked at the kind of concept again later on, and we made a much more successful game called Final Ninja, and it has basically a pretty much similar rope mechanic in it, but this time you can control it with the keys. Now, like I said, it was more popular. I'm not putting it totally down to the fact that we use keys, because we put
ninjas in it, yeah?
Yeah, we put ninjas in it as well, so that helps as well, I think. But the point is, no one complained about the keys, about the mouse swinging this time. No one said, keep clicking that damn advert at the side of your game. But anyway, so the second game that I want to bring up as an example is our game Mutiny, which it was a more popular game, so maybe more of you might have played it. But if you haven't played it, it's kind of a Worms type game. But rather than using exactly the Worms mechanic, you kind of do everything by pulling back little kind of threads and pinging things around, be that whether it's moving your character or firing a weapon at the other player. But it wasn't like this originally. Originally it was a more original idea, which the graphics improved as well along the way. But originally you actually picked up the characters or picked up the weapons, and you had them inside this like little circle, and you literally throw them, toss them with the mouse. And again, we got about halfway through the project, and we were kind of playing it 2-player, and we said, you know what, this isn't that fun. It kind of seemed quite unpredictable on how to actually, on how far you were actually going to fling them. So this time we'd done Dangle at this point. We thought we don't want to do that again. So we went back and we kind of like tried some different things, and we really thought that the twanging mechanic, although maybe it didn't seem as different as unusual, it worked better, and ultimately the game went on to be one of our more successful ones. So I think it was a good decision in the end. So the next section within games is still on the last page. Is
Know your audience.
Oh, know your audience. So we'd been making these kind of games, kind of going after kind of original concepts, and the thing that kind of happened when we did that is that they were quite abstract, so it kind of lended to quite abstract visuals. And as I said, we were quite into the kind of like 80s kind of 2D kind of Japanese sort of games, and they kind of also lended well to kind of abstract concepts. So a lot of our games took a lot of influence from that, and our original games all ended up like that, which you could describe as in other ways they were quite cute. And the audience that we built up because of that, we built up quite a young audience. I mean, it's quite a broad audience, but quite a lot of them are quite young. And so once we'd made like several games, we started to take on staff, and the thing that the staff all started saying is, oh, can I make this gory game, or can I make this gangster game, or can I make a game with big guns and loads of explosions? And we kept saying, you know what, I'm not sure our audience will be okay with that. So I think it's really something that you need to consider, and I think that we've got a little clip here that should illustrate it. This is our game, Twin Shot, in Another Dimension.
Little Mortal
It's going.
Kombat reference there, yeah.
They went really over the top on this presentation. And
He's,
he dies as well. Everyone dies. So really, I mean, it seems quite silly, but I mean, when I said, okay, can we just do something kind of funny to illustrate this, they were all fighting over making this clip. This is how much our staff would really just rather just make things with blood and guts rather than the stuff I make them make. So really, my kind of like point in that was really that you just have to kind of like reflect on the audience that you've built up, and just kind of understand that if you suddenly go and make something that's really different, you risk kind of losing them. So you really kind of have to consider that. And if you really want to go a certain route, maybe do that from the off rather than kind of down the line kind of suddenly bringing it in. Mm-hmm. Who knows, maybe we'll make gory Twin Shot at some point, put it somewhere else. So the next section of the talk is monetizing the games. And this is really the thing that I get most developers contacting us about. They normally don't want to know things about like why we don't put blood in the games. They get that. But so most people just kind of assume, because they see the Miniclip logo all over the place, or they see our games on other sites, that we're mainly about licensing and sponsorship. And that is the way that we started off, and we made and still make quite a bit of money off that. But most people don't realize that actually now we make a lot more of our money off advertising. And we've got a graph here, so you can kind of see how it grew. And it's now around 85% of our revenue that we actually bring is actually through advertising. So I want to just quickly kind of go through how we actually went from not having any advertising, because we don't do things like that, to where we are now, where we do a lot of advertising. Mm-hmm. So we started like most people do, just with kind of like Google text ads. We put them kind of under the games, and I think like, you know, it made us like 50 quid maybe in 3 months. You know, but it quite quickly grew, and as our audience was growing, we got kind of accepted onto more ad networks, and we'd get like picture ads, and then we go, oh, you know what, let's make the adverts bigger so we can make even more money, and it all kind of started to grow. And then the guys at Moshi started up, and all of a sudden we could put adverts in the games themselves, and that was kind of cool, because it wasn't kind of like just trying to up the CPM that we were getting. We suddenly just could do that, but it didn't affect the rest of it, and we could put it in some games that we put elsewhere, so that obviously had an impact as well. But the real kind of main spike at the end, that's really came since we introduced an ad server on our site. And really, if you put an ad server on your site, it means you can do things like you can kind of go, where's my user from? You know, okay, they're from the US. Okay, I'll push that to kind of like a US ad network that can get me a really good CPM. Or, hey, this guy's from like Australia, so maybe I'll push them to an Australian network, and they'll maybe kind of like do better for me. But it also means that you can give your adverts to different networks based on percentage. So you can kind of start out, you can kind of go, okay, I think these guys are quite good and these guys are quite good, so I'll give them 50% each. And then whoever does better, I'll just kind of like up their share a little bit. And they kind of start to cotton on to the fact that you're doing that, and then they start to kind of like up your CPM as they try to outbid the other one. And basically that's kind of like a combination of that extra control has really led to a big growth in the site. So the other thing that's really kind of like upped the ad revenue is the next section, which is the actual traffic itself. So, you can get the best CPM in the world, but if you don't get many hits, then you're not really going to kind of make much money. And if you double your traffic, you're doubling your money. So it's as important as getting a better CPM is really just trying to get more traffic. And so I've got an example for this as well. Lots of examples here. So this is basically two of our mini games, Snotput and Magic Touch, and it's like versing one of our more popular games, Final Ninja. And the point that I'm trying to illustrate with this really is that even though Final Ninja has been a really big success for us, if you actually add up the traffic that the other two games have made, they actually generated more revenue than what Final Ninja made for us on our own site. And that might not seem like a big deal because there's two games on that side and one game on that side, but the mini games took around 2 weeks to make each, and Final Ninja took around 6 weeks. So you can see it's like 4 weeks on one side and 6 weeks on the other. So it clearly made sense to make some mini games. So if I just kind of skirt onto the next section, which is the importance of balance, and really, having said that, I guess the question that you're saying is, why don't we just make tons and tons and tons of mini games? Why bother making any of the large games at all? And there is a kind of balancing act to it, that you get two sorts of traffic to your site when you start to build it up. You kind of get the sort of visitors that will just kind of come back just to see what you've kind of like made and if you've got anything new. And so to a degree, it doesn't matter what you put up on your site, people will play it to a certain degree anyway. There's kind of like a baseline amount of plays that you'll kind of get for anything, no matter how shit. But then you get the other sort of traffic, and it's kind of the new traffic, the traffic that you've managed to attract in, that they've kind of seen your stuff elsewhere, and they were so impressed by it that they've kind of came and looked for your site to see what else you've done, and that's kind of more the Final Ninja side of it. And so really, I guess what I'm saying there is that it's important to sometimes make something that kind of like just pushes the boat out a bit, that kind of really just kind of goes all out to kind of impress and really kind of maybe do better than what else is out there, just so that you attract some new visitors. And really, you're only going to get growth through attracting the new visitors, but ultimately you're going to make most of your money off the visitors that are already there. So it's a constant balancing act, and you just got to kind of find what works well for your own audience.
Games with pirates and ninjas. Good.
Yeah, and use pirates and ninjas and snot. That works all right as well. So that brings us on to the last section, which is what's next for Nitrome. We've kind of like gone from the start where we were just working in a small bedroom. Now we've got a medium-sized office, as it said in the kind of title of the talk. And there was 2 of us at the start. There's now 10 of us. As you can see, they don't look very happy. That's probably because I'm taking a picture of them. But John, obviously, he's here, so he came back. He came back. As we did better, we kind of approached him. We said, "Do you want to come back?" He said, "No." But then
give me more money and I'll...
Yeah, we gave him a couple of pounds more and he came back. Doubled his money there. So, and I mean, as we've kind of like expanded, as we've kind of started to do better, it's meant that we could kind of like have a few kind of like comforts. We don't work quite as hard as we used to, and we've now got sofas and a beer fridge, which is quite empty, as you can see there. So people do drink it. Either that or I'm just tight. So it also means, though, that as well as kind of like being able to have kind of like sofas and stuff like that, it means that we can kind of experiment a little bit more in what we're actually doing and just try things out that we want to try out. And some of that's basically been in Flash, so it's things like kind of microtransactions, or we're kind of like looking at kind of user-generated content and maybe multiplayer games as well in the future. But the thing that's really interested us for a while is really kind of like looking at other formats. And the key format that we've been looking at, primarily because they'll accept anyone, has really been the iPhone, as you can kind of see there. And I kind of really wanted to end the talk on a high, so what I kind of want to do is just kind of give you all the first kind of like look at what we've been working on for probably about the last 6 months.
Well,
which,
on and off, yeah.
On and off, which is our first iPhone game. So we have a trailer of it. And this is the first time anyone's seen it, apart from us. Cool. So hopefully you like that, and that's the end of it. And I don't know how much I've run over or not run over.